Aircraft based in North America, aircraft based in Iceland or Greenland or in the United Kingdom, their umbrella of coverage left a gap right in the middle.
The Nazis carried out one of their most daring attacks on America. Known as Operation Pastorius, the program used U-boats to land teams of Nazi spies on American soil. 2 teams of spies were landed, one on Long Island, New York, the other near Jacksonville, Florida. The spies dispersed into the civilian population and began their preparations.
Nazi Germany wins the Battle of Britain. For the last 6 weeks, the Luftwaffe have been dogfighting with the Royal Air Force over southern England. First, they knocked out the radar stations, airfields and factories. Next, they took on the fighters until there were no fighters left. Now, with air superiority over the English Channel, the Nazis are ready to launch Operation Sea Lion. 10,000 German paratroopers land on the south coast of England. The Home Guard are no match for these elite troops, and the port of Dover is captured. The Nazi stormtroopers have a foothold on Britain, and they're here to stay. 80,000 soldiers and 4,000 panzer tanks cross the English Channel. They land in 3 waves on a wide front, and before the British can react, the Nazis secure a beachhead. The British Army launch a counterattack, but fleeing civilians, a lack of artillery, and harassment by the Luftwaffe drive them into retreat. Central London is destroyed in a massive air raid. German troops march into London. The last beacon of freedom is extinguished in Europe.
At the start of this season, the Pact of Steel was on the back foot. As the Iron Pact pushed across Allied lands, many areas of importance fell. In Arstotzka, much of the west was falling under German and Austrian occupation. This was stopped, however, at the Battle of Mrdovici, where a German invasion force sent to cut off Allied supplies in the Baltic were annihilated by the 9th Rostov Armored Division, led by 2nd Rank Commandant Rostov Putkovich, and an American Expeditionary Army. Following this, almost all the German prisoners were executed, and the rest used as target practice. However, in America, things did not go as well as they were starting to in Arstotzka. The Allied city of Milwaukee in the United States, which was held by an American army and bolstered by a small detachment of the 31st Maribor, was attacked and eventually overwhelmed by a combined Germano-Canadian force. The army, which held out for several days, was eventually pushed back across the river into Milwaukee. The German army eventually, after several successful Stuka attacks and artillery barrages, were able to push the Allies out of the city, who then had to retreat north to rejoin with the rest of the 31st Maribor and aided in the defense of Canada. The British capital of London also fell this season, marking the end of British rule in southern England. The Allied army retreated to a defensive line in Northumbria, where they have held and remained for the remainder of the season. In Arstotzka, trouble continued to brew as the former co-empress was arrested on charges of treason. She was jailed in the black cells before eventually being tried by the Senate. However, a civil war broke out when the Senate was destroyed and murdered, and the emperor was forced to flee east from Avrich von Dor. The Civil War continued for 2 years before Operation Home Run managed to bring it to a successful end. The return of the 31st Maribor Division from Canada marked the turning point of the Civil War. Commander Dmitry Romanov II was not in command of the assault, however, as during the Battle of Regina in Saskatchewan, Canada, he was gravely wounded by a Stuka dive bomber. Acting Commander Antonov Danilovich led the successful assault on Yaroslav, which was quickly and immediately taken. He also helped to recapture Moscow and bring it back under control with aid of the Screaming Beagle's Loyalist American Airborne Division. The former royal bodyguard was also beheaded for treason. In the north, St. Petersburg fell under attack as the German army attempted to advance on the city. However, Allied forces defeated the army using an ambush alongside the main road, using tunnels to remain hidden until the time was right. Once the Germans were overhead, a line of Arstotzkan soldiers came out of the trenches and attacked, startling the Germans. The Germans were quickly overwhelmed and defeated. A line of German soldiers were crucified along the main road as a display of brutality to strike fear into the Germans. The annihilation of an entire German army by a smaller Arstotzkan force demoralized the enemy greatly and led to a large-scale rout in the west for the Germans, who had decided to pull back to more defensible locations in preparation for the inevitable Arstotzkan counterattack. This has paved the way for further Arstotzkan gains in the Baltic, and has led the way for Arstotzkan forces to push into Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. On the bicentennial of the Battle of Anchorage, December 7th, 2191, the capital of Arstotzka, Obroch-Vondor, was besieged by the Arstotzkan forces in an attempt to take it back from the usurper's army. On Christmas Day, the capital was attacked personally, with the emperor himself leading the assault on the city. The assault lasted several weeks, with Arstotzkan forces slowly pushing up the rings of the city. Shortly before the initial artillery barrage, citizens were demanded to take up arms and begin fighting against the occupiers, or they would be considered enemies. Many did, forcing the usurper's army to ring themselves in the upper levels of the citadel. Once the center gates were breached, the emperor declared the city once more under Arstotzkan control, while the usurpess fled to Orkney, where she waged a war against the British in Scotland with aid from the Germans. With the city back in Arstotzkan hands, many considered it a turning point in the war, as Arstotzka could once more focus on attacking the Germans in the west and the Austro-Hungarians in the southwest. In order to distract German forces away from America and the eastern front in Arstotzka, the Allies planned an invasion across the Schleswig-Holstein Channel into Germany from Denmark. The Allies planned a D-Day style of assault, however, it did end up in disaster. While the Allies had planned, with the Scandinavian fleet being prepared to give fire support and pounding the beaches for days along with Allied air support, however, the German garrison was not affected. Well, while they were affected, they were still prepared. The heavy amount of machine gun fire and artillery pounded the Allies as they got off the landing craft and onto the beaches. This made it very difficult for the Allies to push up anywhere off of the beach. While several advances were made, this gentle slope in the center leading up to the German base camp and the city that it was in was pounded with artillery shells and was covered with the screams of dying men. On the left flank, an Arstotzkan armored force managed to push up, but however was destroyed by artillery fire as well as it neared the enemy base. The Danish fleet once more arrived in order to pick up whatever scattered survivors could make it, and then departed back across the channel into Denmark. No further advances by Germany were made, and neither were any attempts to cross the channel once more, as it was deemed too dangerous by Allied command. In America, the largest battle in American history was about to be underway. As the German army pushed ever further westward, the American army was pincered between the Germans in the east and the Japanese in the west. However, they decided to make a stand at the vital airfield in Kansas City, which was too valuable to allow to fall into German hands, so it had to be held at all costs. At dawn, the Germans began with a massive artillery bombardment of the airfield and the city. However, the airfield was the most vitally protected, as the city was considered a secondary goal, as long as the airfield could hold until reinforcements would arrive. The battle was long fought, and over the course of 2 days, the airfield was hit with an unrelenting bombardment. The airfield was claimed a stalemate, as no force could advance across the airfield, as it was too heavily protected under enemy fire from both sides. However, while the Allies focused on the airfield, the city was lost to German forces, which then proceeded to sweep onto the airfield and push the Allies out. The Allies retreated westward, pursued by the newly victorious German army, which still has not seen much resistance during their sweep through the eastern coast of America. The Japanese on the west coast continued their slow sweep east, but seemed more content with staying within their current borders, while they sent troops west and into the Pacific to go fight the growing Arstotzkan threat. In the Far East, the city of Vladivostok, the Arstotzkan jewel of the East, came under siege by the Japanese army. The Japanese army easily outnumbered the Arstotzkan defenders. However, clever placement of traps and artillery managed to keep the Japanese pinned down and unable to move further through the city. The destruction of bridges within the city, leaving only a few options for crossing of the Japanese, easily allowed them to be funneled in. Another benefit was also the mountainous terrain, which was hard for the Japanese to traverse, meaning that the easiest route for them was to go through the city. However, they did push across the first crossing and forced the Allies back to the second level of their defense. The artillery from the Arstotzkans easily was able to keep them pinned down as well and prevent any enemy naval assistance from blockading the city, allowing some resources to get through, although still was limited. In an effort to break through, the Japanese army decided to push through the mountains and attempt to circumvent the Allied army. However, the Arstotzkans, having used this plan before in order to take the city back in previous civil wars, understood the mountain paths and were able to ambush the Japanese and slaughter them all like sheep. While this did lead for a victory within the city, there was still the siege underway. Eventually, the Arstotzkan army in the east was able to push through and relieve the city, which then proceeded to sweep through into Korea. In Korea, many fierce battles were fought, but eventually it was claimed under Arstotzkan rule. In Mongolia, the Japanese forces were also defeated by the Arstotzkan forces, who were better trained and more equipped than the Japanese were. This allowed for easy victories in the east and allowed the push into China. With Allied forces pushing into China, the Japanese began withdrawing more and more troops back to the Japanese home islands from both their eastern territories, their Pacific Island territories, and the territories captured in America to defend the Japanese home island, which was now under threat from both Vladivostok and the Korean peninsula. And with China becoming more of a lost cause, they continued to withdraw, fearing that the total annihilation of their army would leave the Japanese home islands undefended, which was not far from the truth. In both Vladivostok and Pusan in Korea, the Arstotzkan forces and their allies had managed to prepare an invasion fleet for the Japanese home islands, which were now much weaker defended than they would be if they were given more time to wait. After having made several contacts in the Japanese islands and having a paratroopers invade the islands several days before the main invasion, they were able to secure footholds in the provinces of Hokkaido and Kyushu. The invasion of Japan could soon begin. Finally, the invasion of Japan was underway. The Arstotzkan forces that landed in Hokkaido and Kyushu managed to seize and capture the cities and provinces easily, with the aid of Japanese locals who would rather join the new and victorious force that would show them the honor they deserved than the Japanese who had dishonored them and failed them. Resistance by the Japanese army was fierce. However, they were easily crushed underneath the armor of Arstotzkan forces and not able to fight back for long. Many launched suicidal charges against the Arstotzkan forces, but were destroyed as well. With enough local Japanese natives deciding to fight alongside Arstotzka, the 1st Fukuoka Division of Arstotzka was comprised entirely of Japanese volunteers who helped pave the way for Arstotzkan troops by pacifying locals and waging guerrilla war against the Japanese army. With only a few days' march to both Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the south, many paths were opened up to the Arstotzkans from the island of Hokkaido. In order to spare themselves the slaughter of resistance, the entirety of the southern island of Hokkaido also surrendered to Arstotzka, instead of just the singular province. With napalm being dropped on Kyoto and Tokyo, many indeed suspected that the Japanese Empire would capitulate, which it did several days later. It was not long before our Arstotzkan forces converged on Tokyo, and heavy fighting was fought throughout the entire city. Much of the city fell under our Arstotzkan control, except of the eastern suburbs, where massive fires raged and it was considered uninhabitable by all forces. When the fighting shifted towards the Imperial Palace, members of the Imperial Guard reportedly launched bayonet charges against approaching Arstotzkan troops. The palace was eventually stormed by a detachment of VDV paratroopers, who had to fight their way through the compound room by room. No prisoners were taken, but it is believed that the Emperor was safely evacuated before the city fell. Japan was on the cusp of defeat. The entirety of the Japanese home islands surrendered on December 7th, 2193. The Japanese government had fled the country and gone into exile in the American territories that were captured, with their new capital being that of San Francisco. The rebel empire, being in control of the home islands, declared the new shogun to be Mitchell, or as he calls himself, Mitchell Hirohito. Most of the east as well fell under Arstotzkan control following this, as Arstotzkans pushed into Mongolia and further into China, thus destroying and defeating the remaining Japanese forces on mainland Asia. This paves the way for Arstotzkan pushes into the Empire of Vietnam and further and final victory in the war. With the Pact of Steel finally on the uphand, there is a chance of victory still for the free world over the Nazis. There's still, with Japan out of the way, there still does remain Germany, Austria, Vietnam, the Ottomans, and the Spaniards. However, with continued hope and continued fighting, the Allies may yet still have victory.
If you leave me to my own device, I never have to compromise. The city is like a jungle, gotta make it mine. Put my fears right out of sight, beat the hustle, better get it right. In a game where the strong survive, only the strong survive. Your chains will not hold me down, the break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. The power is raining like thunder, ready for a fight. These lions inside. These lions inside. These lions inside. These lions inside. I had to learn to be the hero. I started on a heaven zero. In the city like a jungle, I had to get mine. Never give, you gotta take. Be the catapult to storm the gates. Cause the champion is never giving in. See it through till the end of days. Till the end of days. Your chains will not hold me down. Break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. The power is raining like thunder, ready for a fight. These lions inside. These lions inside. Can't tame these lions inside. Can't tame these lions inside. Ground that they're walking, ain't cutting through their skin. They're hunting down their prey to the bitter end. Ground that they're walking, they ain't cutting through their skin. They're hunting down their prey to the bitter end. The ground that that they're walking, ain't cutting through their skin. They're hunting down their prey, let the games begin. Your chains will not hold me down, break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. Their power is raining like thunder, ready for a fight. These lions inside, these lions inside. Can't tame these lions inside. Can't tame these lions inside. It's ground that they're walking, cutting through their skin. They're hunting down their prey to the bitter end. Ground that they're walking, they're cutting through their skin. They're hunting down their prey, let the games begin.